Okay, good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Policy and Resources Committee. Hope you can hear me clearly. And as usual, we're conducting this through Microsoft Teams from the chamber. Items in privates recommended under the relevant legislation that we take out item 9 in private. And for the avoidance of doubt, I'm ruling items 4, 5D, 10 and 11 as urgent to allow the matters to be considered prior to the next meeting of the committee. Please ensure your microphones are off. And before we begin, can I ask Councillor Don Crichton to lead us in prayer?
Our gracious God, we give thanks this day for your continued goodness to us and for all the blessings that you pour down upon us. We give thanks for our health and strength and for all the blessings that you provide for us, both as spiritual and temporal. We pray your blessing upon us as we gather today as a committee. We give thanks that we have the duty to perform this, and we pray that you would bless all our deliberations, that to your glory. We give thanks for and we give thanks for the opportunity we have to serve them in this capacity. We ask that we would do so to your glory. We pray for all the homes and families that we represent and the communities. We pray for all those who are in our care as an authority, from the youngest to the oldest. We pray that you would watch over them and keep them. And we pray for those who care for them, who give such a dedicated service and give so much to care for those who are vulnerable and who need support. We ask then that you would bless us and we would keep looking to you. Bless us as a community and as a country and as a nation, that you would watch over us and bless all that is done in your name this day, and bless the chair and the chief executive and all who serve in different capacities to make sure that the business of our authority runs smoothly and efficiently and effectively. Go before us now, pardon our sin for Christ's sake. Amen.
Thank you, Councillor Crichton. Okay, then you'll all be well versed in the conduct of the meeting in terms of procedures and protocols. So we won't dwell too much on that. And you'll also be aware that in terms of declarations of interest, members must leave the chamber or end the call remotely. Before we begin the meeting, I just
structure and another couple of questions, but I don't know if you want to take them all together. Or,
well, yeah, just give us them all together.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Thank you. And the second one is, can the union representatives circulate the representations that were made in respect of the restructuring to members? I don't know if that's possible. And with regards, number 3, to the severance payment made under the minute, offer, it's under the paragraph determination of
Chair, Councillor Mackenzie, can I ask Mr. Mackay to give some guidance at the minute?
Chair, if we're talking about individual members of staff, we may need to go into private for that.
Okay, well, so can we leave that?
Yeah, I'm happy for that. Yeah.
Okay, if you want to proceed with the third question, then we'll need to go into private. Do you want to proceed with that one?
Well, whatever's convenient for yourself, Chairman.
Okay.
Do you want to deal with the first two and then?
Okay, we can just respond to the first two. And if you want us to hold over the third one rather than going to private at the minute, can we come back to it under private items at the end? Would that be okay?
That'd be fine, yeah.
So there's two questions there that you raised. First of all was the final savings from the restructuring, and the second one was, is it possible to see circulate the union representations?
That's correct.
Mr. Barr?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The savings from the restructuring of human resources and organisational development form part of the savings required by the Corla of Chief Executive's Department, which members will recall equated to about 11 or 12% of the whole budget of the department. So it forms part of that package of savings which the department has met. And I'm sure the report on revenue monitoring to the next meeting will confirm that. I can't remember the exact figure for that section, but it forms part of the business plan that was approved by the Corla last February, which, as I say, required these savings from Chief Executive's department. In terms of representations from unions, these are always made available to the members who are determining that particular question. In other words, if the determining body is Human Resources Subcommittee, the representations are made available to the subcommittee. If it's Policy and Resources Committee, which it would be if it's more than one department, these would be made available to Policy and Resources Committee.
Mr. Mackenzie, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, so it's only available to, in this case, the Human Resources Committee. Yeah, can I ask then, following that, whether representations against this, just on a general basis, can you give that sort of overall picture?
You wish to respond to that, Mr. Barr?
I can't at this. I honestly can't recall the representations that were made from anyone on this particular restructuring. But I'm happy to. Yeah. I'm happy to talk to Mr. Mackenzie about what these were.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
okay.
Fine. Thank you.
Can you meet with the Chief Executive and maybe get some more feedback that would suit your inquiry? Okay. Thank you. Councillor Manford.
Hello. Thank you. I'm not a member of your committee. Just in relation to this, I'm assuming that this has been carried through under delegated authority. Yes, it's not coming to the council or for agreement. It's delegated authority. Is that have I got that right?
Mr. Ball.
Item 3, yes, it was agreed. And
it's been done.
Would be to recommend.
It's already been agreed. Otherwise, it would be to recommend. Okay, thank you. So item 4 is meeting of the Galley Committee for noting. Anybody got any things you want to raise on that? No, thank you. So we move then on to performance management. The following reports provide an overview of the business plans and related performance issues at the end of the second quarter 21-22. We've got Mr. Barr, Norman MacDonald, Ian McKinnon. I will highlight key points and answer questions on the respective remits. So can we go first of all to Mr. Barr, Chief Executive?
Thank you, Chair. There's quite a lot in this report and there's a few updates, so I'll be as brief as I can. There's the information is really all contained in it and there are quite a few links to other documents. But just to turn to performance at section 6, as you can see, the business plan has 53 actions for the department, and 50 out of these 53 are on track at the end of quarter 3, and the 3 actions which are amber are set out in the report. I don't believe there's anything to concern the committee there. On key performance indicators, which are corporate rather than departmental, 9 are on target, 1 is off track, and 13 are annual. And you can see the only one which is off track is in relation to funding, which is not a particular concern at present. Lots of information in the benchmarking framework information, I think, about sickness absence, some good reductions there. Information on gender pay gap and the job evaluation model. So some useful information there for members, but I won't read it out to you. Turning to key policy areas, section 10, of particular note, European Social Fund, ESF programmes, these end at the end of this year, unless we seek an extension, which we will. And that's critical. There are a number of key posts, employability, financial inclusion, really important posts to the community, which are funded through ESF. And at the moment, as you know from 11.2, there is other funding planned by UK government and Scottish government, but that is not in place yet. So if these posts are to be continued, if that work is to be continued, and these people and the people who benefit are to be served, then we will need to look to our own resources, or at least a combination of our own resources and others. And these are important posts. 11.2 needs an update. You will all have seen UK government's announcement of its proposals for Levelling Up Fund. A very large document on Levelling Up Fund arrived last week in our inboxes, together with guidance on Shared Prosperity Fund, which is welcome in the sense it's been looked for a long time. At the moment, it's a very weighty document. At the moment, we're at executive summary of the executive summary stage, but we will put a report for your information and to allow any work to be done between March and June to the meeting of Policy and Resources Committee on 9th of March, because members need to be aware of the provisions of what we can do, of what Levelling Up Fund is capable of achieving for us, and critically, what the Shared Prosperity Fund will be what projects will be eligible for funding from Shared Prosperity Fund. So that will come by way of update on 9th of March. Transport, I think, has focused very much on ferries as ever and on air traffic management. There's a report later on the agenda on that. A lot of energy developments, of course, and these are set out. That's John Cunningham, Strategy Manager's work there, and he will answer any questions on that. Public services work, again, very focused on the National Care Service. Shetland and Orkney and ourselves are working with Scottish Government to make sure as best we can that Ireland's interests and needs are addressed even at the early stage. But Scottish Government has established a large design and delivery authority for taking forward the National Care Service, and the bill is expected to be published in the spring, which will not give the Corla potentially a great deal of time to consider what goes into it. We will, of course, be able to contribute to the consultation on the bill. So those are all the updates, I think, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive report and a lot going on there. Anybody got any questions or queries on that particular area? No? Okay. Can we then move on to the second item, B, which is performance monitoring around strategic finance, accountancy and exchequer services? And this is a report from our head of accountancy and exchequer. Norman, are we here? Yes. Morning, Norman.
Thank you, Chair. For some reason, I can't put my camera on, but that's okay. I don't really have much to add to the report. Our targets and PIs largely follow the annual accounts and budget cycle, so there's nothing significant to report at this stage. There are a couple of action points that are behind, but these are in relation to audit recommendations on NDR. We've had to delay that work due to work on COVID grants and reliefs, but we will follow that up as time permits. On the local government benchmarking framework, we were also due to do some work on that, but these have also been delayed due to staffing issues and COVID. But we are hoping that by the end of the financial year, we'll have addressed these points.
I can't find it.
I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Norman. Any questions? Couple of items, maybe. Like every other department, you're having to prioritise. But resources are pressed, and COVID has disrupted. So you're prioritising, but we'll get all the reports completed in due course. Okay, happy with that. Move on to item C, which is internal audit. I don't know. I think Mr. McCaskill is off, so I don't know if anybody wants to speak to that. Or okay, anybody? Okay. Okay, so the report is there, routine. Anybody got any questions or queries? Okay, happy to do that one. And the last one in this section is, of course, the report by the Director for Investment Delivery, Ian McKinnon. And I believe Ian has joined us. Okay, or Dan. or is it Dan McPhail?
It'll be Dan McPhail.
Yes, yes, Mr. McKinnon did tend his apologies. He had to attend another meeting. So we've got Dan McPhail here. I don't know if you want to speak to or just take questions, Dan. Quite happy with the report as is.
Ian has arranged for myself, Tim Langley and David MacLeod to take any questions on the three reports there that are listed in the appendix. So happy to take any questions.
Anybody got any questions for Dan or his colleagues? Are you happy to accept the report as is? Okay, thank you very much for that. Okay, so happy to note the report. Item 5, agreed. Move on to item 6, which is around finance and the Crown Estate revenues, which I know a lot of members are interested in how we're getting on with that and progress on it. The report concerns the criteria for distribution of year 3 Crown Estate revenues and looking for homologation of decisions in respect of 4 ongoing projects. So year 1 and 2 applications and allocations to community groups were administered by CLD staff in consultation with local economic fora and, of course, ward members. As that approach meets the Council's policy goals in the area of community empowerment, community wealth building and participatory budgeting, it's proposed to maintain that broad approach for year 3. Given the insights in the Scottish Government review, it is however proposed to develop a refreshed, more focused set of criteria, and these criteria are outlined at Appendix 1 to this report. It should be said that there was a lengthy report by Scottish Government, and in the main we were very close to what they were expecting.
If there is an area forum within a ward ready to submit their applications now, can these submissions be dealt with and distributed this side of the elections in May?
Mr. McKeever, do you want to comment on that?
I don't see why they cannot be distributed. I know if the projects have been agreed by members, have been agreed by the local fora, and there's an agreed approach in the community, then I think we would want to get this money out and deployed in the community at the earliest possible point. So I cannot see any particular difficulty with what Mr. Fraser is suggesting.
No, neither can I. And I think, you know, since day one with these monies, we do want to get them out the door as soon as possible. We've got a good mechanism for agreeing how we distribute the money using local fora and local member input. So if all that is in place, the officers will be checking that that's in place when the bid comes in, and they can just proceed forthwith, whether there's an election or not. Happy with that, Ronald?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Everybody happy with that approach, I take it? Councillor Kenny John McLeod?
Happy with that. I was possibly under misapprehension that it was only certain ones that had a clear and specific commitment that would be carried forward. But I'm more than happy that that be opened up. Yeah. I just think that perhaps we weren't fully apprised of that.
I don't think we could do any more than take the carryovers until we got approval today. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair. The projects for which homologation is sought were projects which were absolutely dependent on year 3 funding, but because of the lateness of that, were in serious danger of failing, and they were therefore urgent. I mean, everything else will have to go through the system, but it will go through the system as Mr. McKeever said, as quickly as possible if it meets the criteria.
Okay, convener.
Just briefly echoing what Norrie said earlier about the funding for athletes travelling for sports, but also in terms of the Crown Estate revenues, that it is important that that funding is used in a really meaningful way in the community, and that discussion has to take place through a number of different fora in each community, and it's something that's been well used over the past, and hopefully that's going to continue for some time. There's a slight reduction in the amount we're getting in the next year, but I don't think that's anything we should be worried about. We should, as a council, we should be looking to increase that, because undoubtedly the Crown Estate revenues themselves are increasing year on year, and we should be mindful of that, and we should be asking questions of government as to how we can unlock some more funding and spread it right across the islands.
Agreed. So with that, I don't know if we've got any other members.
Yes, Chair.
Sorry, Don, you're disadvantaged when you're in the chamber these days, actually. You should not seen on screen. Donald Crichton.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, given today's decision,
can we be assured that there will be some publicity around this in terms of the process for applying and process, the criteria, etc., for going out to the community groups?
Yes. Yes,
Make sure that people are aware of
absolutely.
what exactly is involved.
We shouldn't just rely on members actually carrying that information to the wards. It should be also publicised, and we'll leave that to Colmian and his team to do that, to ensure that people are aware of the funding and the way in which they can apply for it, and that it's open right away.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, that being the case, I take it, Councillor Noddy MacDonald, that's just a legacy hand.
Yeah, legacy hand, sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, thank you very much for that. So that's good. We've agreed the criteria and we're able to proceed with that with a slight tweak that in terms of what Noddy. So happy to agree the recommendations for approval. Thank you very much. We move on then to item 7, which is his third quarter capital monitoring 21-22, which provides an update on the progress of the capital programme 18 to 23 as at the end of last year. The Scottish Government settlement announced in December 2021 indicated a general capital grant of 5.6 million for 22-23. Item 7, no? Derek's just hasn't got over the defeat by Rangers recently, so it's lack of focus there. Yeah, right there. You sorted. Okay.
Can you learn now?
I don't need to start again, do I? So the capital programme, anyway, the long and the short of it is the capital programme has a further budget shortfall this year of just under 1,924,000 over that which we already planned. So the appendix to the report details the projects, the project level and the progress of the delivery of the programme, and Norman MacDonald will answer members' questions. So has anybody got any questions? Usual report, just giving you the capital monitoring position. Councillor Ray Mackenzie. Ray.
Thank you. If I can just get back onto the actual chart itself. And I've mentioned this before, and I thought it was agreed, and if it isn't agreed, then you'll tell me. But under 2013 capital, and under Education, Sport and Children's Services, it states that under Stornoway Primary, there's a £3 million budget. But as you know, and as has been said before, this is actually basically the early years building. And I keep asking that this be shown as a separate item to Stornoway Primary, because it does give a false picture over the years as to what has been spent on Stornoway Primary as opposed to a new early years building, which, as I keep saying, could have been built anywhere in the island of Lewis anyway. So can this be done and shown as a separate item, because it just doesn't make sense. And looking back over the years, they'll say, oh, you know, there's been plenty spent on Stornoway Primary, because there's £3 million there in 2013.
Yeah, I think you're quite right, Ray. There has been plenty spent on Stornoway Primary. I mean, to say that it's not, the money has been spent at Stornoway Primary. We're not going to say that the money has been spent in Bunavanetta if it's been spent at Jimson Drive and Stornoway Primary. So I don't think there's any issue here. I mean, we all understand that it is for early years, but still, that's where the money has gone. And I don't see any issue with putting it against it. It's not misleading, or I don't think people misunderstand it. And if in years to come people look at the list of spend, the fact is £3 million was spent at that location. It's fairly straightforward. And I don't think the fact that, I don't know if you're concerned that because that's there, it means there'll be never any more money spent at Stornoway Primary or something, but that's not the case, of course. We got money from government for preschool, early years or whatever you want to call it, and it's been spent there. So, I mean, your point is we understand where you're coming from, but the fact of the matter is this table is accurate, and it shows that at Stornoway Primary, £3 million was spent on early years.
Well, thank you for that. And I'm sure that it was already agreed that it would be shown separately, but I can't tell when. But as you can see, there's educational respite unit just above that, and it's not necessarily all lumped under one school. So there's absolutely no reason why, you know, it can't be shown separately, even if it's Stornoway Primary School early years as a separate section. That's the point I'm making, that of that £3 million, £3 million has certainly not been spent on or anything remotely like that. A tenth of that has been spent on the school.
Well,
So
you will.
it's not
I
possible.
think we'll draw a line. I don't think we're going to change it. If you go down to the last item, it says Laxton School Classroom Extension. And if you look at the narrative, it's exact same narrative as Stornoway Primary. The Laxton School Classroom Extension was early learning and child care grant funded. Exact same as Stornoway Primary. We're not putting an extra line in for Laxton. No difference. So I think we'll leave it as it is. Has anybody else got any further comments on it? No. Everybody happy and understands it? Councillor MacLeod?
That's oranges and apples, that, because it is part of the school. Laxton.
Yeah. Well, we're not. Nobody
on.
sees any reason to change it. We'll move on. Kenny John, do you want to make any point on that?
Not on that particular matter,
Okay,
Chair, but it was just to flag up again just something that we briefly mentioned at committee, and that's the adaptations grant and the pleasures on that going forward, and the fact there's another couple of years to run on that, and they're really running into difficulties in identifying monies for new projects. It's absolutely vital that we're able to support people to live in their own communities, in their own homes for as long as possible. And I think if consideration can be given to the bolstering that particular budget at the first opportunity, so that planning can be put in place for these schemes that are coming forward.
Yeah, I think we all agree, and thank you for reminding us, Kenny John, but we do all agree that that is a fund that we must try and maintain, and hopefully we'll be able to find some solutions with the director, with Norman MacDonald and the budget board going forward. Thank you for that reminder. That said, everybody happy to agree the report, third quarter one? Thank you very much. Moving on to item 8, which is the Islands Infrastructure Fund, which is the one that you are champion ahead of the game. You're just too fast for us all. This is a report by the Director for Communities, and it details awards. An award of 1.379 million, which we obtained under the Islands Infrastructure Fund, and this report's looking for approval of arrangement to approve projects, because we need to get cracking with this one. To enable delivery within the constraints of the fund, it's recommended that the Council agree the initial schedule at Appendix 1 as the priority list for implementation. And it's also really important, it's recommended that delegated authority is granted to the Director for Communities in consultation with the Chief Executive and Chief Finance Officer to adjust the list as required to ensure that the fund is used to maximum effect. Because of the timescales, we need to give them that flexibility. And you'll notice that the list exceeds the total value of the fund. Again, that is to give flexibility so that if something drops out or is not doable within the timescale, another one is ready to go. So there are recommendations for approval. I don't know if Colum or Joe wishes to speak to this. Okay, no. So there are recommendations there for approval. Colum, do you want to just give a quick summary of that? What we need to do here and why it's important that we have the flexibility and the urgency?
The scheme has come in quite late, and it's come in with significantly more funding than we initially anticipated. The funding has to be, expended, quite quickly. Various deadlines around March, around contracting. So we've got to move with projects that are shovel ready, to use that phrase. So we've identified what we've got on the stocks that we can move pretty fast with. So I think all these projects are deliverable within the time frame, although there will be a lot of energy having to be expended to get them over the line. So that is why we've got that initial set of projects in that manner. But as you say, Chair, looking for a wee bit of flexibility just in case one or more of them isn't able to be achieved within the time frame. But I think we're reasonably confident that these projects can be achieved.
Sorry, Ustian, you first and then Councillor McCormick.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I did express some concerns to the Chief Executive on the process followed here by the department, and I will be following up on it with him, but we'll leave that as it is just now. However, I do have a question for the Director, and it's in relation to the full fibre rollout in North Uist. I had been asked several weeks ago about the survey work being undertaken on the west side. Found out eventually it was to do with a fibre rollout. The townships in this area, Horsta, Ballaloch, Balmartin and Ballalone, do not currently have access to BT broadband. So I was just wondering if they will benefit from this work, and maybe the directors can respond on that.
Mr. McKeever.
Thank you, Chair. There has been no location decisions taken on where we are going to do the pilot. So what we're doing at the moment is exploring with Highlands and Islands Enterprise and the R100 rollout team what will be the most effective location in which to run a pilot. So there'll be a mix of cost effectiveness, number of houses, number of households, a number of businesses we can get onto our service. So this is very much a pilot to try and see if we can get a full fibre service out to communities that don't have a service at the moment. So it's quite innovative what we're trying to do. There will be a lot of learning coming out of it that hopefully will be transferred and benefit other communities. But at this stage, we're just trying to explore through which location would offer the optimum choice. A number of candidate location areas have been put forward by elected members in Uist, and happy to take the areas that Councillor Robertson has outlined and explore around them. The only caveat I would put to all that is we've got to come to decisions fairly quickly on what areas we're going to do. But we will keep Uist members fully informed and updated on progress and which are the candidate areas we think is going to offer the most effective solution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Comprehensive answer. Are you happy with that, Lucian?
Yes, happy with that, Chair.
Yep. Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Angus McCormack.
Thank you very much, Leader. I just would like to make a general point. It seems to me again that the department is forced into a situation here that it doesn't necessarily desire. I'm not saying that any of the projects are not appropriate, but it is very likely that there are other projects that could well be looked at in terms of this particular grant awarding. And the number of times in which we are being offered monies at such a late stage by government is something that perhaps we ought to be raising with government, because it really isn't giving our communities a fair opportunity to put in projects that they have. There was the other one, the levelling up money that came, and we more or less had to do the same as we've done here, take the projects that we knew about and stick them in and see what happens. That's not a good way of doing things. And I know that communities that put a lot of work, for example, into the levelling up projects and didn't get any response were very disappointed. And we really do have to have a better system which allows a much fairer distribution of the monies in future. And I just wish that the council could maybe get in touch with this is from the Scottish government money, the last lot was from the UK government. Both governments need to realise that we do need some advance warning so that we can prepare the best for our communities. Thank you.
I'll bring in the Chief Executive. You're right, and we do speak to government regularly about it. Unfortunately, this is a way that they behave. Both governments, money becomes available. We've got to be ready to move. I think in 90% of the cases, we probably have got legitimate and sensible cases we're putting to government, because Colm Ian and his team will be aware of what's boiling around and what's looking for money, and they'll have met with communities. So I would say 90% of it is probably, well thought out, valid and good projects. But you're right, inevitably when there's short term and quick decisions to be taken, sometimes the real value is lost to us because we haven't got time to work up a case for something additional. So we do make the point, but it's part of working with government. When you take the money, you're so glad you get it that even though it's short notice. Malcolm, did you want to come in?
Very little to add to that, Chair. Just to assure that these points are made not just to the two governments, but also to Audit Scotland. We had our preliminary meeting for our best value assurance review this week, and it's a point I was making about strategic financial planning. It is very hard as the core budgets, revenue and capital, fall significantly, and we move to a bid culture. It is very hard to call that strategic financial planning, because we have to have a number of projects, and communities have to have a number of projects at the ready to go. That inevitably leads to disappointment, and then the Corla cannot step in even with any capital funding, as we did in the past, to support these projects and keep them going. So you can see the 5.1 of this report. You think, well, everything's included in that, but when you read 5.3 and the criteria and the conditions, it's quite a different matter. The money is welcome, of course, and is genuinely welcome, but it does not help capital planning in any sense of in any real sense of that term. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That said, good news, and we hope to get these projects underway. 1.3 million or so projects across the islands. Happy to agree. Thank you. Item 9 is, Item 9 is in private, and at the same time we'll take the outstanding question from Councillor Mackenzie then. Moving on to capital programme, item 10, Barra and Battersea Community Campus, is a report by the Chief Executive and Ian McKinnon, the Director for Investment Delivery. It's providing an update on progress associated with the community campus project and looking for approval at this time for a revised preferred layout option. Work associated with the previously reported reassessment exercise is now substantially complete, and subject to the collation and archiving of the report body and substantial volume of technical appendices into an online archive, a copy of the full report and its appendices will be available from the Director for Investment Delivery shortly. What we have here is a copy of the executive summary at Appendix 1. A copy of the recently published stakeholder briefing note, which provides further detail associated with the rationale for and the outcomes from the reassessment exercise, is also included, and that's at Appendix 2. And details of each of the shortlisted layout options are included in the annex to the briefing note and evaluated against the criteria set out in the body of the report. So a summary of the allocation of costs and the respective indicative funding packages is provided in the body of the report, and layout option E6 is identified as the option which has the lowest current indicative funding shortfall of just of 3.88 million, just under 4 million. The establishment of a finalised multi-agency funding package is subject to clarification by the respective funding parties. A lot there, a lot of new information, a lot of detail, but of course it's a very large flagship project. So there are recommendations for approval, but I'm sure that perhaps Ian, is Ian back in? No? Or Malcolm,
I'm here. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Ian. So do you want to give us a summary now of where we are now, having completed these exercises? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed, Chair. I mean, the summary of the outcomes of the reassessment exercise have been included in the body of the report at sections 5 and 6, and you'll see at table 2, as you've indicated in your introductory comments, gives us an indication of the scale of the estimated costs for each of the alternative layout options, and also based on what we see as the potential funding package and the packages for each of them, where the funding shortfall is, the current funding shortfall is. That there is still a lot of work to be done. In fact, one of the reasons I'm late coming to your meeting was that I was involved with ongoing discussions with Scottish Futures Trust in terms of the Scottish Government Learning's contribution to the funding package, and we'll have further discussions with colleagues at the Health Directorate on Friday. And the next milestone after your approval, hopefully the Council's approval of the revised layout options, E6 as the revised preferred option going forward, is to continue to work on that funding shortfall. In terms of Scottish Government Health and Hub North themselves, they call it the Stage 1 process, and at the end of that milestone date, we will have to have the situation where the cost on one side of the equation is completely balanced by the funding package on the other side of the equation. So there'll be no funding shortfall at that point, and we're going to work very hard over the coming period to try and reach that position. In the meantime, you'll see at section 6 and 7 of the report some of the other sort of ancillary issues around the delivery of the project. Stakeholder engagement has always been a priority for us in the delivery team, and I think we're able to respond or report very positively in terms of the outcomes of a meeting that Malcolm and I had with community representatives in Barra in January. And the feedback that we've had from the 2 community councils is included as Appendix 3 to the report. And since then, we've also had similar positive support from the Barra Sports Forum and Core Barra as well. So that's a good situation to be in, and we will continue to maintain that level of engagement going forward, also with our own service managers in terms of their aspirations and preferences in terms of the design and the accommodation that's being provided once we get to that stage. The other thing around model of care is also being dealt with by colleagues from Health and Social Care, and I know that Jack Libby is planning a visit down to Castleby in the next few weeks, because as was recognised at the last meeting of your own committee, that the promotion of that model of care, being housing with extra care, is very important for our own staff, for service users and their families, and the wider community on Barra as well. But we now have those 3 ducks in a row, if I use that term, because the council had already endorsed it. The health board had endorsed it, and just last week, or the week before rather, the IJB endorsed it as well. So those ducks are all in a row now, and that the continuing promotion of the benefits of housing with extra care as the model of care is the priority for colleagues in health and social care going forward. So aside of all of that, I'm very happy to take any questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for that. I know that in Uist in particular, it's geese in a row that are causing people a lot of difficulty. It's good to see that level of progress, and thank you for the detail there. Councillor Kenny John MacLeod.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Ian, for the detailed update on this. This is probably one of the most complex projects that we've had to deal with so many key stakeholders involved in it. And it's good to hear that on this side that we have indeed got our ducks lined up. But one critical thing is that we don't seem to get clear indications or a clear voice from government as to what the likely level of intervention might be on this. So we're progressing on the preferred option. We know quite clearly what we want from the project to deliver, having had extensive consultation. I'm just wondering what the risks and an assessment of risks going forward that government may not actually come in with the level of funding required, and were that to happen, where do we go then?
The discussions with government and probably specifically the individual directorates, because one of the challenges that we've encountered and had to deal with over the last 2 or 3 years since the inception of the community campus as a place-based investment is the different ways that different directorates within the government deal with projects, a major capital investment like this. We've tried to encourage the directorates to work together and come up with a single pathfinder process for approvals and funding. That unfortunately hasn't happened, but because the project can still be, we always emphasise that the project is a single project, albeit made up of a number of key components. Each of those key components can be dealt with by the respective directorates within government. And there is less risk than you probably think in terms of the money that we can get, that we're hoping to get from health, the money that we're getting from SFT, and hopefully the money we're getting from HHP in terms of their role with the HWEC units. And I think what will need the extra step from government is the level above the directorates, because each of the directorates will have to comply with their processes and approvals, gateway processes, and they'll be able to identify what money that they'll be able to put towards the project. But what we'll need is collaboration and cooperation and the assistance from government, probably at a higher level, to address the premium, the premium and the cost for Barra. And we've always had a very positive relationship with government at those high levels insofar as this project goes. And their recognition of this project as being a Pathfinder project and being developed on the basis of place-based investment, which is one of their own strategic priorities, we hope will stand us in good stead in terms of trying to address that final funding gap.
Thank you. Do you want to come in?
Very briefly, Chair. As the director says, we have worked hard at making sure everyone is in the same room at the same time on this. But to be fair, we could not go back to government until the option was finally agreed and the cost estimated as accurately as we can. And as you can see from the report, the best option is also the most cost-effective option, which we think should appeal to government, as indeed it does to NHS, the IGB and the Corla.
Okay, thank you for that update. Councillor Manford.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. A very welcome update. It's remarkable how proposed a relatively modest footprint addition to a project can make such influence in the way it can be looked on at local level. And the benefit, of course, is the school, the hospital, the care home can remain operational without any decap until the new buildings are completed. And of course, in addition to that, possibly much needed affordable housing opportunity as an additional benefit. It would be fair to note, I think, that this is exactly what was promoted by the former chair of Castlebay Community Council, Mr. Curry, 4 years ago. And the reference we're talking about the Scottish Government, Mr. Morrison, the Deputy Director of Health Infrastructure Investment, wrote to us in the same manner on the 5th of July last year. So that this is all very, very encouraging. And of course now endorsed by both community councils and the other organisations that Ian has explained to us. I mean, this is a fantastic transformation of acceptance and understanding and support in the local community, and great credit to everybody who's worked to bring this about. There is one rather sensitive element I would like to raise, and it's relating to the heritage, which was building, which was at the outset hoped to be an integral part of the complex. Well, now, I'm not critical at all of any of the thing to do with making a affordable housing or provision possible. The building may find itself, and may be worrying to find itself in a housing complex rather than in the other complex. Now, I am not at all proposing that any alteration at all to the recommendation, but should and only should the Heritage Society make an approach that it would wish to be further engaged in it, that could be welcome within the context of 3.1b, if that is at all possible, should that happen. Because I wouldn't want under any circumstances to see any delay at all in the progress. The only thing to close, the outstanding things are, as comes from the community regularly, that and the Chief Executive has addressed it to a degree, that more understanding be made available on the delivery of services from the buildings and how these services will be developed and their level of delivery within the community. That more work is made on that so that it's clearly understood. And I will close by complimenting and commending this council, on the resolve and determination it's displayed and the efficiency we've displayed here to get the project from where it started to where it is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Don, for that. And your observations around heritage, we won't deviate from the recommendation, as I'm sure yourself agree. We don't want to put any blockers in or any restraints. So I'm sure your observations will be taken on board by the team, and if they can be accommodated, good and well. But I'm sure we all agree that we will pursue the recommendation for approval as it is in front of us today. And yeah, I would commend particularly the work recently of Ian McKinnon and the Chief Executive, but so many people have been involved in this, and we're getting to a good place with it now, and are confident that we will get it over the line. And in terms of service delivery and use of the facilities, certainly there'll be ongoing information coming from the team so that everybody in the locality understands how this facility will work. Can I ask Councillor, the convener, to come in?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Donald and Ian for their presentation. I think at the Investment Delivery Board, I'll go back a bit to the 4 years that Councillor Manford was talking about. I remember being one of a small group of people who, after an event in Castlebay School, had the first look at what the campus might look like. And certainly there have been some trials and tribulations in that period until now, but it's really heartening to see the support from the community councils and the wider community. And the only thing that still needs to be resolved is a small matter of land being acquired to complete the project. And I think it's a fantastic facility, and I think it is something that we may be looking at sometime in the future for other communities to have that hub delivering services right across the community. So everybody's worked really hard to get to this position, not least Ian McKinnon, but certainly the community in Barra have to be congratulated as well.
Okay, thanks for that. I'll bring in a couple of members and then I'll let Mr. McKinnon come back in. So Councillor Crichton and then Councillor Paul Steele.
Thank you, Chairman. Just want to reiterate what's been said already about the determination and commitment that has been displayed in ensuring we get to this stage, and for the unity that has been evident now among all the stakeholders across the community. But can I ask, in terms of the shortfall we have here, and in terms of we have already committed to this project in 2 successive capital programs, is it a prospect that there'll be a commitment in a 3rd capital program? I know it'll be up to a new council to decide that, but given the shortfall, is it likely that there'll have to be a commitment in the next capital program?
Yes, Chair, I think that's likely. The current capital programme runs until December, I think, 2023. I mean, the project should be, we all hope, will be fully committed and up and running by then. But in terms of the distribution of money, I imagine that would have to be continued into the next capital programme. But Mr. McKinnon will correct any errors in that assumption.
No,
Okay.
Yes, well, just to say that one of the things that we are hoping to get to the bottom of over the next couple of months is not just the funding contributions from Scottish Government directorates and other external agencies, but also the potential need for additional funding from within the CORLA. Other than saying that, I think it's probably for future meetings of the council and maybe future councils for us to, once we know the quantum of that, to weigh that up against other competing priorities within the next capital programme.
But as usual, we will try and source the funds elsewhere, given the nature and state of our own capital programme. Councillor Paul Steele.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think Councillor Manford covered most of the points I was going to make, and I think it's good to see the reaction this alternative layout's getting in the community. I think it answered a lot of questions, and I think you touched on it yourself, Ian, and Donald too, that one of the remaining questions is pretty much the housing and extra care model and how that's going to work in actuality. I've raised at IJB that we need to go and speak to the community and maybe give examples of how it's going to work. So it's good to hear that Jack's going down. So I just wanted to comment on that. So it's good to hear that's happening. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Steele. So with that said, are we happy to agree the recommendation for approval on this project? It's a good milestone to reach. We're not over the line yet, but we've never been so close. Agreed? Thank you. Moving on then to item 11, which concerns Connected Communities Broadband Network decommissioning. It's a report outlining a range of solutions for the decommissioning of the Community Broadband Initiative project relay sites following the closure of the ConCom broadband network. There's a requirement to undertake a programme to decommission the sites and remove the equipment and the infrastructure at each site location. There's a list of the sites appended to the report. And Joe, do you want to just give a quick overview of this? Then I'll ask members if they've got any questions. Joe McPhee.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Members will be aware of this report coming previously before them in terms of the obligation to decommission these relay sites. We've been looking at options to do that. There is industry interest in the tilt over poles and the green cabinets on each of the sites. So we're proposing firstly that we pursue that option at no cost to the Corlea and of course at no risk to the Corlea. And then secondly, engaging with each of the site owners in terms of offering a sum of money following DV's valuation to leave the sites intact, and indications are that some of the site owners would be happy enough with that proposal. There may be some sites which we have to remove completely, and that is likely to be, quite expensive on a site-by-site basis, but we would hope to do that through procurement at a local area level. Discussions ongoing internally in terms of identifying the funding for this activity. I've in discussions with the Chief Finance Officer and the Director for Communities, we've estimated in the region of 50,000 allocation for this. So those discussions are ongoing, and once the funding has been identified, and only then would we continue with the decommissioning process. There has been some interest over the last while in the R100, whether these sites could be repurposed for broadband rollout. Now, there's been some interest in a couple of sites. Whether those individual projects are actually viable using the broadband voucher scheme remains to be seen. But we've discussed this with the R100 team at Scottish Government, and we're keeping our options open on that. But I think those discussions on whether that could be done are ongoing. But happy to take questions, Chair.
I've got Euston Robertson first, and then Councillor Crichton. Euston.
Thank you, Chair. Question for Joe is in relation to the community buildings that were used to piggyback the signal off, and a number of these community buildings still have a lot of equipment belonging to Connected Communities within them. Is there a plan to deal with these that type of situation?
Joe.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yes, there is, and the the equipment from those buildings really ought to have been removed, I think, as part of the HIE package of removing equipment. So we will review these with colleagues in High and then make sure that any redundant equipment is moved as quickly as possible. But the site, the network itself, of course, is completely non-operational now. So we will certainly note that and I'll discuss with High colleagues.
Thank you, Joe. Councillor Crichton.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to remind us that, in terms of the R100, we have raised concerns about this programme. As you remember, we had a presentation at Sustainable Development, and we wrote to Kate Forbes, who is responsible for connectivity, about our concerns about the R100, in particular the inadequacy of the voucher scheme, and the fact that nearly 2,000 homes will remain untouched by the scheme. So we have received a response. They've invited us to enter into dialogue with them, but we are still pressing, and it is the view of this council, that the rollout of one R100 should be fully funded to ensure that every area of our communities are connected for the future.
Thank you, Councillor Crichton. I'm sure we all agree with that. Councillor Kenny John MacLeod.
Thank you. I just want to check when Mr. McPhee was referring to some potential costs for decommissioning facilities that have that are indeed redundant. Is this to be a shared cost between the partners? Because the benefits were and the investment was a joint venture with the enterprise, Western Isles Enterprise. Anyway, I would hope that any subsequent decommissioning costs for completely redundant sites would be shared as well.
Joe, do you want to come back on that?
Yes, thanks, Chair. They've already undertaken the decommissioning of the network elements of each site. In other words, they've removed all the telecoms related equipment for each of the site areas, and the contractual arrangements they had with the power companies, and particularly SSE, in removing the power cables and closing those off. So there has been a significant cost to them of the decommissioning element that was particularly allocated to them. These sites are the relay sites, of course, the small poles, and these were investments which were undertaken by the Commonwealth. So there has been, in a sense, a shared allocation of costs, and this is our share of it now to decommission this final element of it. And members will recall that the agreements with the crofters and the landlords and the grazing committees were all done on the basis that of no cost, but they were also done on the basis of the obligation to remove that, and that any future, that there would be no sort of commercial benefit from any commercial operator from the use of those sites without obviously some kind of remuneration to each of the site owners. So that's the kind of allocation of costs element.
Thank you for that. Councillor Colin McMillan.
Thank you, Chairman. It's to do with the decommissioning of the connected community sites before other areas of the islands which didn't have access to the connected communities and still don't have proper internet. Is there any opportunity of these being used as relay sites as they were before, because they do have the SSE connection? I'm thinking particularly of the likes of Locheinert, where I've been looking to try and get the R100 in, but the distance in terms of topography from Locheinert, from Ormaclad to the Locheinert settlements, could a line-by-site relay be used in conjunction with the R100? Is that possible just before we decommission these sites? I'd like Mr. McPhee's expertise and knowledge on that, because was it John Ewan who was doing the work on that as well?
Okay, Joe, do you want to come back on that?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yes, Locheinert is one of those sites which we've been discussing with one of the potential operators of the R100 sort of voucher scheme. Members will recall that there are operators who have to offer that service to communities. And there is only one operator currently on that list based in Newest. So those discussions in terms of Locheinert are ongoing. I haven't seen the details of the costs and the business plan element of that to see where the viability lies, but certainly it would require more investment by the Scottish Government over and above the voucher investment to make this viable. And I think that's a critical point and a critical weakness of the voucher scheme, that in small communities like ours, that kind of voucher scheme is requires to be significantly enhanced. So I'll certainly take it up with Councillor Macmillan and work with him to see if we can find a solution there.
Yep, thank you for that. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other further questions or comments? Happy to agree the recommendations. Thank you. Item 12 is Air Traffic Management Systems, ATMS update. A report from Mr. Burr and Angus Murray. It provides an update in relation to recent developments concerning HIAL ATMS and related proposals. On the 24th of June 2020, the Council took a decision to authorise the Chief Executive, in consultation with the Chairs and Vice Chairs of PNR and Transport and Infrastructure, to pursue an urgent dialogue with HIAL with reference to the Council's view that HIAL's procedures and processes are legally questionable, and thereafter to take such action, again in consultation with the Chairs, as may be required to safeguard the Council and the Western Isles community's interests. So it was also reported that the Council had sought legal advice previously on ATMS proposals, and in light of recent developments to date and the possible outcome scenarios from the recent negotiations between HIAL and Prospect, it is now proposed that the Council revisit and review the initial deliberations of Legal Counsel, continue these discussions with Legal Counsel, and proceed accordingly as deemed necessary. Mr. Burr, do you want to comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thanks for that introduction, which sets the scene. As was explained at Transportation and Infrastructure Committee last week, this report is a bit out of date, inevitably, because it preceded the HIAL board meeting of 24th January, which confirmed the position in respect of ATMS and announced the formation of a working group for Benbecula and Wick airports and their proposed downgrade. And of course, we're very interested in that. This matter is not concluded simply because the ATMS system is in abeyance. So the urgency of the recommendation, which is, as the leader said, affirms a decision we took in 2020, is not so great, because the working group will do its work. Our contention remains, though, that its work needs to be island proofed, and if that is not on the horizon, this recommendation, which I'm asking you to approve despite the update, gives the necessary authority to take action quickly, obviously in consultation with the leader, the convener, and the chair and vice chair of Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Another point, though, which was raised and which Councillor Robertson and I have discussed, is whether the Corla should seek direct representation at member or officer level, or both, on that working group. I think there's a good case for that. It is the case made by the councils in the Highlands and Islands, particularly this one, I have to say, which I think has contributed to the decision on ATMS. And our influence is, our need to be on that working group is obvious. It would be appreciated by the employees concerned, from whom we have received support, and I think it's just appropriate in any case as part of a culture of island proofing. So if you're minded to add that recommendation, that Councillor Robertson and I will make appropriate representations about representation of the Corla on that working group. Okay. Thank you, Chair.
So I'm sure we're all happy to add that particular to the recommendation, so that we do make representation for the working group. Councillor Euston Robertson, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chief Executive. Hyle and Prospect, the union, met on Monday, and I believe a decision on the working group will be made at the Hyle board meeting, which is next month. There is obviously concern locally in Benbecula about what the terms of reference might be and what the potential makeup of the working group will be as well. So I think we should be asking for representation on the working group and also supporting the people in Benbecula and raising some of their particular concerns, Chair.
Okay, and we'll do that as a matter of urgency. It makes perfect sense that we're on the working group, given that it's a key asset within our community. So, yeah, happy to agree. Recommendation as amended. Thank you. Then we move on to item 13, social and community services, recruitment and retention. The report concerns the completion of the social and community services recruitment and retention employee survey. It was undertaken in December 2021 as we promised, and there was 205 responses from employees across the health and social care service. The results of the survey will provide an evidence base and inform the change process intended to improve recruitment and retention rates and overall employee satisfaction levels. Parallel to the survey, initial pay modelling has been undertaken to explore viable options to improve the overall offer of employment. Service information requests and financial costing exercises are ongoing as a matter of urgency. The Council is committed to progressing this matter possibly and quickly, whilst working within the bounds of the existing pay model and equality legislation. There's a due process to follow, and when proposing changes to employee terms and conditions due to the potentially significant implications from a legal, financial and operational perspective, but pace continues and hopefully we'll get outcomes in due course. Carmen MacDonald is here. Carmen, do you want to add anything to that or take questions? Do you want to
just again,
comment?
It was a positive response to the survey. The feedback gained will provide a very solid evidence base for progressing the change across the service. As you stated, pay modelling is underway. We don't have all the financials yet, but once we have that information, it'll kind of give us a clearer indication of the potential financial impacts and allow the options to be developed further in line with the needs of the service and obviously available resources. It is understood that pay is a primary concern for employees, but there are other factors to consider. So in addition to reviewing options around pay enhancements and recognising any changes to employees' duties and levels of responsibility, consideration has to be taken kind of in terms of the longer term sustainability of the service. So how can we make the service more attractive to potential employees whilst obviously increasing the levels of satisfaction of existing employees? So we are pulling all these strands together. I think it's been stated we want to get it right, but there is due process to follow. So this report is for noting just the progress the service has been completed and all options are continuing to be developed. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Karen. Before I bring in any member who wants, can I just suggest that maybe an update is given to the staff? You're giving an update to the committee at the minute, but an update to the staff to tell them where we're at and what we're doing, so that they know that in response to the survey, we are acting and we are responding to their needs. So if that could be arranged, that staff could be updated.
Yes, I can liaise with Jack and we can get something.
Yeah. Mr. Bard, yeah.
Chair, just to reassure members, this is not in any kind of long grass or even medium grass. It's very much in the short grass. There is a draft report for a future policy and resources committee, and I'll speak to colleagues in HR as to whether we can move that on in advance of the to the meeting on the 9th of March, which contains a great deal of detail. The survey results, which are very interesting and very encouraging in many ways, but also addresses such matters as supplements, duties, evaluations, shift patterns, all of these things, which I know members are aware of. So we will do our level best to move that on as quickly as we can.
Thank you for that. Councillor Cal McLean.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not a member of your committee. Let me say that this report is welcome in many respects, but it's encouraging to hear what the Chief Executive said, that it's moved from the long grass into the shorter grass. But I feel that we've just moved a little bit as to where we were over 4 years ago. That's been quite honest with you, because we still have things like due process, etc., being added to it. Can I ask for a time scale, please? Is it possible for us to get a time scale on when this will move from the medium-term grass to the absolute shorter grass? In other words, another thing we could do is update P&R next time and put this on the agenda of the next meetings of P&R.
Councillor McLean, I'd be fully supportive of that. Absolutely, to keep the pressure on it and to keep it as topical as possible, because we have made a commitment to address it. It's taken longer than any of us would have liked. I don't think anybody disagrees with you. All members are fully behind the changes that we're hoping to put in place. We do hope that these changes will be long-term. They'll address the needs of the staff as articulated to us, and it'll make the service more robust in terms of retaining people and recruiting people. I think there was reference at our last meeting about a recruitment campaign, but I am firmly of the view that there is no point in doing a recruitment campaign until we get the actual terms and conditions, deployment, rewards right.
Absolutely.
And once we do that, then the recruitment will start. So, yeah, I agree with you entirely. There are a whole host of reasons why we ended up where we've ended up now, but it's good to see that we're dealing with it meaningfully. The staff understand that we're taking it seriously, and hopefully we'll keep pacing it as you suggest, coming back to each P&R. Councillor Gordon Murray.
Thanks, Chair. I also welcome the report. I want to reiterate what Councillor McLean said. It's good to see some of the sentiments that are expressed in this report. I know that an update, as you just said yourself, for the March series, but I would say that we should have the plans for the sustainable practices be presented to members for the March series. I think.
Say that again. What do you mean by that?
The plans for sustainable working for the care workers to be presented in the March series rather than just an update. I think it's so important. I think everyone, yourself included.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
I would expect that to be the case, because we will have by that stage an idea of how we're going to restructure and a different reward system. So I would think that whatever we can do to bring a concrete plan in terms of what we're hoping to see the service look like going forward to get that retention and then move on to recruitment, I think I'm quite happy to support that, because, as I say, it's just something that we have to deal with. And of course, we've got constraints and we've got processes, but at the end of the day, we do know that we need to address this issue, and we have to do it by whatever means possible. So
thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Councillor Ray McKenzie.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, thanks to Carmen for the report. 205 replies. I welcome this report, but I'm surprised that there was less than 40% actually replied, you know, in view of the strong feelings about this. And is there any sort of theory as to why, you know, there was such a low return? I know it's double what happened 2 years ago or 3 years ago, whatever, but it's still, you know, for such a controversial item and such an important item, I would have thought there would have been a higher return than 205.
I don't know if Carmen wants to come back on that. I mean, the return is pretty high, I would say, statistically, from when you do these surveys. It's quite a high rate of return. And I think also we may take a view that the returns might reflect that there are many people within the service who do not have issues or challenges. You know, there are issues and there are challenges we need to crack on with, but there are maybe people who aren't as concerned as others. So I think the survey will reflect that. Carmen, have you got any view on that?
Yes, again, just statistically, anything around the 40% mark is a very positive return rate for general surveys, and that's what we get for our routine service when we do our kind of full across the board employee service across the Corla. So it's a lot more positive than previous surveys done just across that service. So I consider it a very positive response.
Thank you. Thank you, Ray. And Kenny John McLeod.
Thank you, Leader. I welcome this report, this interim report, and it's encouraging that we've been able to respond so quickly, really, having made a determination just a few weeks ago that this is going to be a priority. And given that, I'm just wondering, there is likely to be a significant financial implication arising from the considerations leading from this, and the scheduling of that with the other considerations that the budget board has to be looking at for the year ahead. I'm hoping that the work will be done, but not unduly accelerated, so it's not a flawed piece of work. But it's important that we make that provision to meet the likely outcome from this restructuring review of the conditions of employees, particularly in this sector.
Yeah, that's a fair point, and I hope we'll all remember that when we come to budget setting, that we do want to reward our care workers with a better package, and that costs money, and we have to bear that in mind when we're setting budgets. One thing that I am trying to emphasize with the team is that let's find out what we need to do to retain people and then cost it. Don't say this is our budget and do what we can within it. So let's find out what the optimum solution is, see what the cost of that is, and then see if we can find the money, because I don't think we have any other option. But one thing we will do is put pressure on our budgets, but we have to put pressure on them for this particular case. Okay, so I think everybody's in agreement that it's good to see the progress. We'll keep it monitored as suggested at each and every PNR, or even in between if there is significant items to come to members, and if there are planning issues or something that shows the shape of the structure of the staff going forward, we'll bring that as an update. Because I know all members are agreed around the importance of this, and I hope the staff in our care staff are aware of that particular concern and priority. Okay, thank you very much for that and for your input. Item number 14, this is about the Scottish Parliament call for use around Net Zero Scotland. It's looking for approval of the response that the Council has made. They've launched an inquiry into the role of local government and its cross-sectoral partners in financing and delivering a Net Zero Scotland. The inquiry aims to seek out the main barriers at the local level to Scotland reaching its net zero targets. It will consider the practical steps councils are taking to break them down, and in partnership with business, local communities, voluntary sector, etc. And will also highlight areas where change will be needed if councils are to play a full role in helping achieve a net zero Scotland. Anna Hume, our senior researcher, is available to respond to any questions or comments from our members. Anna, did you want to make any comment?
No, so yeah, as you said, this was a Scottish Government call for views, just seeking to determine how we're working with our cross-sectoral partners, and the response was pulled together with input from across all relevant departments.
Okay, thank you for that. Anna, Councillor Colin McLean, you got any questions?
Thanks again, Chair. I'm not a member of your committee, but may I first of all say that this report is a good report, and to be quite honest, it's a very readable report as well. Some reports aren't readable, but this one is readable. So Anna, I can congratulate you on that. May I first as well say congratulate and commend the officers who have been working on our how can I say, our plan to get to net zero. Although I would say that there's one or two things in the report, and I'm not putting this as a criticism of it. For instance, you talk in the section there, council planning, decision-making capacity in relation to net zero. You mentioned there the reduction in our carbon footprint and development of an island route map to net zero. But you do mention in another part of the report, you talk about a low carbon future. Could I say that in relation to the islands, and you do mention in the report that there is the transition to net zero for island areas will have significant costs, particularly around infrastructure such as transport and housing. May I say that it will have more than costs, it will affect our way of living, and it will affect the marginalized and those the less able to pay for what is, and I've mentioned this before in the taxes that are going out there. But can I say that maybe as an island or as islands, we should be attaining a low carbon future rather than a net zero future. The government, I know, is taken over by what I would call climate zealots and going and kowtowing to what they want, which is net zero for us to reduce our way of living so that the likes of me who have sheep won't be able to have them, and the likes of Calla Macmillan in South Uist will not be able to have cows, and we will be reduced to not eating any greens, for instance. So the fact of the matter, if we're going to a net zero emission, I think it's pie in the sky, to be honest with you. And I do think that if it were a low carbon future rather than a net zero future, just asking what you think of that.
So I'm sure there was a question in there, a comment, but you get where Mr. McLean is coming from. I saw Councillor Roddy Mackay breathing a sigh of relief there when he heard that Mr. McLean wouldn't be eating any more greens. But despite his comments about sheep and cattle, he did still think we would have some pie in the sky somewhere. So if you can make sense of that now, I think we know where they're getting from, but I think Callum was basically saying, is net zero unrealistic? Is it
absolutely?
Is it unrealistic for these islands? And should we be doing a watered down, more realistic approach in terms of carbon targets?
You've summed me up wonderfully well, Mr. Mackay.
So Anna, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, so I think when we talk about net zero, I think it's important to understand that it doesn't mean reducing all emissions to zero, but any emissions, there obviously will be some sources of emissions, particularly in the islands, that will be impossible to reduce. For example, those from cattle, also probably those from potentially our ferries and our flights, which will be difficult to bring down to zero. But the idea of the net zero is that there will be kind of emissions removals that negate those, so that the balance overall is zero. Work's kind of still ongoing to determine how we can work towards our climate targets. We are required by the Scottish Government to set net zero targets, but it's still we're still working on how we can kind of plan to do that.
Yeah,
so Anna, Colin.
Sorry, Chair. What I was trying to get at was the way of life. The houses that we inhabit do not lend themselves to a net zero target. So what I'm saying is, for the way of life and the fact the houses we inhabit, which have been handed down to us for generations, it does not lend itself to a net zero target. I'll finish with that.
So Anna, can you give a categoric assurance that by sending in this response, Colin will not be thrown out of his house and he will be able to continue to eat lamb and beef? No, you don't need to answer that. So I'll move. Paul Finnegan, first of all, then Kenny John McLeod. Paul.
Thanks, Chair. Not a member of your committee. It's a really good report and it's very interesting reading. The one thing I was going to say is, I'm just wondering if it shouldn't maybe be a bit stronger in its language in terms of going back, because we talk about net zero. I mean, and if we were to get an interconnector, we could really work quite significantly towards getting a zero net zero contribution in terms of what that interconnector would give us as a springboard. And I'm just wondering if we shouldn't be emphasising and putting more emphasis on the fact that in a way we're actually being held back by structures and institutions within not only Scottish government but within UK government as well, that's stopping us from, really isn't up to now, stopping us from achieving these things. Thanks.
Anna, have you considered that perspective?
I think there had been some mention towards the support that would be required. I think there is mention of the interconnector in there, but I can consider that.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that. Kenny John McLeod, then.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come back? Yeah, because I noticed in question 4 it's talking about the wind turbine in 2027. It says when we get connected, but I would say if we get connected. And it was really just to put more emphasis on the fact that we're working, as a council and as a community, we would work quite quickly towards this net zero achievement, and we're actually being held back, and they're asking for views on how we can actually contribute. Well, we can contribute very, very significantly, not only to local but to national net zero ambitions. So thanks.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Paul. So this is another line we can use in terms of reinforcing our desire to have you know, are interconnected and all that opens up. So yeah, we should reinforce that in every response to government, and this is another opportunity to do that. Agreed. Kenny John MacLeod and then Colin McMillan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, excellent again that we're hearing good news on this. But I think realistically, we always have to deal in a net effect in terms of carbon. Whatever we do in life has a carbon impact. And the fact that we're able to net off some other positive work that we do. One of the more interesting things I've come across recently is the sequestration of carbon by peatland restoration and the potential income that could generate for communities through carbon credits. I think it's very useful that is now being recognised as a legitimate way of sequestering carbon and in fact has the potential to give communities some positive benefit, financial benefit, as well as contributing to the overall carbon reduction. So I would certainly encourage that more communities would look at that as a means of both contributing to the net carbon or the carbon reduction and also as a potential income stream to communities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. I don't know if it's worth it while actually doing a little piece of work to issue that sort of guidance or suggestion to communities so that we put it in their thinking. Some communities might not have considered it.
Yes, Chair, and that would be an excellent idea. I know over in our own communities in the Arnold area, there has been a couple of small projects to show just that it is not only possible, but potentially will lead to an income stream for the community. So I think greater information and distribution of that would be helpful.
Okay, perhaps we can think about that, Anna, and something that maybe we can think about communicating to our communities. Move on to Callum McMillan, then Euston Robertson. Callum.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the opposite word here is net zero, so that we balance one thing off against the other. And when one looks at the fact that we live in rivers of wind, if you look outside today, when it's a sort of falling over sober sort of day, it's an opportunity missed for every day that we miss, that we could be taking most of Scotland's net zero contributions and contributing to it ourselves, so that we could have a peat fire in every room and go through that, and we'd still be far and away contributing to Scotland's net zero. But it does need a more comprehensive or considered view from alpha to omega in how we do it, so that it's not just the interconnector, but the council services and how the council approaches this manner in a holistic way. So that's something that we should be looking at, and perhaps the report could look at that in a more expanded view. But the other thing I was going to say, and Kenny John mentioned it, I think about 2 years ago, Councillor Murray proposed a report on the sequestration of carbon in the peatland and how that could be looked at. At the time, the department was too busy, so perhaps that could be looked at again. I think it was probably in the summer of 2019 or thereabouts that the report was asked for. So that might be something that could be looked for when somebody has time, as well. So we have a lot of opportunity, not just in eating more greens. To echo Colin McLean, I would set up a roasting spit and get the coals ready myself and contribute to the carbon. But
okay,
that's something to look at. But it's in terms of the opportunity, we have a great opportunity out here west of the Minch to contribute to net zero in a positive way, and also to look at the carbon sequestration payments that would come our way from peatland.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we've mentioned that, and I think it's something that we can leave with Anna to pursue. And that carbon sequestration, that has, in fact, it came up at Cohigh, I could say, a couple of times. And I remember what the then Minister, Cabinet Secretary was Fergus Ewing, encouraging all of us in the Highlands and Islands to pursue and to try and understand and grab that opportunity. So it is something, and hopefully now that Anna is in place, it's something that we can pursue more actively, as suggested. Ustian Robertson, then Ray McKenzie.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment, really. I've attended some of the climate change working group, which is mentioned in the report here, and I don't know the Chief Executive knows my views on this in terms of I think there's far too many academics round the table, actually, and probably a lot of them would not understand or appreciate some of the comments made by Councillor McLean, which I fully back. And I hope that going forward, nobody will stop me cutting peats for the winter fuel anyway.
I don't think that's going to happen. But yeah, understood. Ray McKenzie.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think we should emphasise strongly in the report that, and I don't know if it is sufficient, but potentially in future that we could be not net zero, but minus net zero or minus zero, really, with investment in wind and wave, and particularly in tidal energy. And, you know, I think this particular aspect should be really emphasised.
Thank you for that. Councillor Gordon, would you like that? Councillor Gordon Murray, then Councillor Alston MacLeod.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and I welcome the comments about the peatland restoration. I think that the key is peatland management. That's important, not just the restoration. And I welcome the Chair of Communities and Housing's comments. It was 4 years ago when I first brought this up, and it was rejected as sustainable. So maybe Communities Committee may take it on as something that they would be interested, because it is community focused at the end of the day. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. Alston MacLeod.
Thank you very much, Leader. Thank you, Anna, for your report, and I think you're doing a good job. But I'm thinking back over the number of consultations we've had with the Scottish Government over the years, the hours we've wasted of officers' time when they just don't listen. I mean, they go on and on about net zero. The latest ludicrous suggestion we saw last week was cutting the bottom of classroom doors to make it, you know, better for pupils. I think we, as a council, we've wasted far too much time on these consultations. Hasn't really got us anywhere. When you think of the designations, arguments and discussions, we've written ourselves blue in the face trying to convince them that they shouldn't impose these designations on us. So just a general point, Leader, I think we're wasting our time, quite honestly, very often.
Well, it is frustrating, but in any event, thank you for a very good report, a comprehensive report, Anna. You've heard some of the members' views here. Last word to Councillor MacLean, and I don't know if he's still looking for reassurance about his sheep, but last word to Councillor MacLean.
Thanks for letting me in, Chair. I just would like to remind people about carbon capture. Many years ago, there was a scheme called the Lewis Peatland Scheme, and in Lewis, and what that did, and I remember it well. I remember the late Angus Graham chairing a meeting down in Back School, and he said to them when we were getting into the peatland scheme that it wouldn't stymie any development within the peatlands area, and we were convinced by them that it wouldn't. It actually did. So because we could have put some wind turbines in places that we are now not allowed to do it because of the blanket bog, etc. So I would be very, very careful about what you ask for, because what you might ask for may come down a few years' time and stymie any economic growth. I'm just mentioning the Lewis Peatland Scheme as an example.
A cautionary tale. Thank you very much for that, Councillor MacLean. And yeah, joined up thinking is important, looking ahead. So a good hearing for your report, Anna, and thank you very much for it. And I'm sure you'll take on board the comments and give appropriate weight where necessary. Thank you very much. Okay, we now move into the last item was any reports outstanding. I don't think there are any of these. And so we're now going to move into private to come back to